Good evening, Oklahoma. Thank you for joining me as we continue to have important conversations on the topic of race in Oklahoma. You know, over the past few weeks, it's been on my heart to lean in, listen, and have conversations with leaders from our state to help move us forward together. Today's discussion will focus on economic development and the challenges faced by minority-owned businesses and those in underserved communities. Oklahoma is better when we work together, and I'm looking forward to hearing from tonight's panel about challenges, opportunities, and what we can put into action going forward. You know, before we get started, I wanted to introduce and thank our panelists for joining us today. We have Rose Washington. She is the CEO of the TULSA Economic Development Corporation, which has helped thousands of small businesses with startup or expansion over the last 30 years. She is also the immediate past chair of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. So welcome. We have my good friend, Senator Kevin Matthews. He represents District 11, which includes downtown Tulsa, North Tulsa, parts of West Tulsa. He's the Democratic Caucus Chair in the Senate and the founder of the 1921 Centennial Commission and the membership chair of the 100 Black Men of Tulsa mentoring organization. So welcome. And Maurianna Adams is the Executive Director of Progress OKC, a nonprofit created to support and revitalize Oklahoma City communities and preserve the social and economic fabric of underserved neighborhoods. Progress OKC forms public-private partnerships to target local investment effectively. Welcome, thank you. We have Charity Marcus with us, a member of the Governor's Minority Business Council. She's the founder and CEO of Avenu Consulting and Avenu PR, business and entrepreneurship consulting, and she co-founded Black Women Business Owners of America, which helps Black women entrepreneurs, business owners, and founders with resources and connections needed to be successful. Thank you, welcome. And we also have Wes Mitchell. Wes founded a technology consulting firm in Tulsa after 35 years with Hewlett-Packard. He is the current vice chair of the Tulsa Community College Board of Regents, and he's also a member of the Governor's Minority Business Council. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here today. So each one of you come to this important conversation from different perspectives, and there are different ways you are working to support and develop Black businesses in Oklahoma. So to get us started, I'd like to ask each of you to begin by sharing a little bit of your story and the underlying problems and challenges you see and that we need to address. And we'll start with you, Rose.
Governor, thank you. Thanks for hosting us and for seeing the value in this conversation that honestly is quite past due, especially at the level of office that you hold. So we appreciate your heart and your willingness to start the dialogue. So I'm with Tulsa Economic Development Corporation, and honestly, my beginnings go back to rural Mississippi. I'm a graduate of Mississippi State University, majored in banking and finance, went into banking after college, after grad school, went to work at a historically Black university to help business students move from college to career, and later moved to Los Angeles, worked in the community and government relations at the University of Southern California, and then found my way to Tulsa, where I help provide progressive lending to promising businesses that are starting and growing. And one of our priorities is helping African American and other minority businesses gain access to capital. And so one of the biggest challenges that we see is the fact that accessing capital, and you as a banker or founder of a mortgage company and a bank understand this, you cannot start a business without money. And there are many reasons communities of color don't have access to capital. And that story, the conversation could go on, but in my mind and in my heart, the lack of legacy or the destruction of legacy affects the ability for many African Americans to start and grow businesses, and those that have a desire to need access to capital, education, apprenticeship, training, and then procurement opportunities to help those businesses thrive.
Thank you. Senator Matthews?
I also want to thank you, Governor, for convening this panel and being open to people of color, and no matter political party, no matter where we come from. Thank you for having us. I worked on the fire department for 25 years as administrative fire chief, and as you may know, many firefighters are entrepreneurs with all the days that they have off. And so when I retired in 2010, prior to that, in 2008, for the last 12 years, I started the Entrepreneur Shadow Program, of which Charity Marcus wrote the outline for us to get young children, when they're out of school, unsupervised, most prone to gang violence and teen pregnancy, and a little stipends so that they go with business owners to learn to own businesses. We could solve a lot of things by giving these young people internships and opportunities to be exposed. Many of them don't have parents, like we did back in Black Wall Street in 1921, where many black people own businesses in North Tulsa. That's not the case. And so we started that program to give them that exposure. I also had a franchise, the Ronnie Deutsch Tax Centers, of which Rose funded through TEDC, and we were able to pay off that loan in half the time. And then even after that business closed, when the national franchise closed down, I also had a business interest in the dry cleaner franchise at 61st and Memorial in Tulsa. And so I've had several major businesses. Kevin's Cleaners, 118 North Greenwood, was a business of mine. And so I have a keen interest in African Americans having business opportunities that create self-sufficiency and create jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you for having this important conversation. Again, my name is Maurianna Adams. I am a person of faith. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a black woman who's fortunate to own a business as well as be a servant leader in Oklahoma City. For Progress OKC, we find that it is important to invest in people and places. And so we reinvest in neighborhoods and businesses and communities where growth and wellness are best suited to take place. And some of the challenges that we have seen are from a community perspective. We have individuals that are wanting to create ecosystems, infrastructures for small businesses, medium businesses, to go back into these underserved, historically disinvested communities. But they have trouble. I think about a project in particular that was a white man that was very experienced in urban planning and development and making these projects happen, but he ran into so many hurdles with trying to do it in a quadrant of the city. And so when you have that historical context and, again, the legacy of not being able to open businesses, not being able to access capital, not being able to create the ecosystem in which businesses can start, they can sustain, and then they can grow, what happens is those neighborhoods are deprived of the amenities and services they so desperately need. And as a result of that, grocery stores close, businesses close. And so there's this ripple effect. And our goal is that we want, no matter what your zip code is, for you to experience urban happiness, right? And we know that that is directly tied to wellness and economic opportunity. And for many people, especially communities of color, they haven't had the access to the social capital or financial capital to achieve that, nor have those who are wanting to move into those communities been able to. And so when we think about COVID-19, for example, and the disproportionate effect that it has had on African American businesses, you think 3.3 million businesses were impacted by that. 22% were closed. But when you look at African Americans, there's a disproportionate effect where 41% of businesses, African American businesses, were disrupted and closed between just February and April 2020. And I want to make sure that we say businesses, like any community, I've been fortunate to work at the local level, the state level, and work with federal entities on piloting initiatives around health and wellness and economic opportunity. I've traveled this beautiful state. No community is the same, no business is the same. But when we're seeing those disparities, we have to figure out how we can create new pathways to opportunities for not only that individual to thrive, but the communities in which they serve and are located to thrive as well.
Excellent.
Thank you, Governor, for having us. I am a transplant turned Okie. I graduated from Bixby High School, went to TU, left TU and worked. And then I started my entrepreneurship journey in 2009 when I founded my first event planning company, and have been on an entrepreneurship journey ever since then. One of the things that I noticed even moving back here after being gone for a while was that whenever I was in spaces, I was always the only Black woman entrepreneur in those spaces. And that's what led my business partner and I to found Black Women Business Owners of America, because like me, she was always the only Black woman entrepreneur in spaces. And it really was eye-opening to see how many Black-owned businesses do not have access to the spaces and to the rooms that are important to that social capital that Maurianna just spoke about, that which leads to having the financial capital to operate and run and have successful businesses. And then also, that's part of the work that I'm excited about doing on the Governor's Minority Business Council, and having a council that focuses on minority businesses and how to break down those barriers socially, financially, and in the government as well.
Okay, Wes?
Thank you again, Governor, for having us, and thank you for the first Minority Business Council that I've known of since I've been here 15 years, another important step in starting the dialogue. I like to start at the beginning to give some context on my perspectives. And I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, in the Negro Hospital in Jacksonville. I'm the third generation college educated, but I'm the first generation that had a hospital available to them. And from there, we moved to Washington, D.C. Went to school, went to the historically Black college and university, Howard University. And my career took me through Miami, Florida, Charlotte, North Carolina, and here 15 years ago to run the data center for that was formerly Sabre Incorporated. And I say all that just to paint a little context about the view that I have and having my foot in two places. When I moved to Charlotte, I probably had one of the largest jobs in the city. And again, when I go to the chamber, I was the only Black in the chamber. Now my foot was one foot in that old legacy and one foot in the new. So I was provided some opportunities, but I think Senator Matthews summed it up. There needs to be investment in social capital as well as financial capital in the underserved neighborhoods, because once they can thrive, a lot of the problems go away. I'm very passionate about my participation on the Board of Regents for Tulsa Community College, where our mission is everybody belongs here. We want to make sure that people get certificates to earn a livable wage or transfer to a four-year school to get further their education. But I think education is one of the keys to success. But if you don't have anywhere to reach for, education becomes not that important to you.
Well, Maurianna, I loved what you said about urban wellness, and as a business owner myself and a person that started my company, entrepreneurship is so hard in the first place. I mean, as far as being in the beginning, it's all about cash flow and hiring somebody. And so the access to capital, I understand very well, and be able to make sure that we have that access to capital as an entrepreneur. But the social capital and the things that you're talking about, I'd like to learn more about as well. So this question's for you, Rose. You know, as we were getting ready for this conversation, you know, one of the things you shared is that there are fewer Black businesses, and those that start fail at a greater rate. Black businesses and entrepreneurs lead their companies in a more challenging operating environment. You know, can you talk about that environment and the state of where Black businesses are right now in the state of Oklahoma specifically? That's what we're talking about, but you can talk about nationally as well.
And Governor, I'm not a researcher, so I'll share with you my perspective on this and not what has been studied. But I will tell you that there's an entrepreneur in all of us. And some of us are more confident and able to just push through and make dreams a reality. And so the social capital that Maurianna spoke of and the ability to engage with other people who are like you, who have had successes starting a business and growing a business, are all very important. It's lonely at the top, and it is very nice to have others you can share your concerns with and get great feedback. I will say this too, my grandmother, my namesake Rosie Washington, raised me, and she, in my mind, had a sharecropping business. She didn't realize that's what it was, but in effect, she had a sharecropping business, and her 12 children were her employees. She had a day job in town as a domestic, but she owed the plantation owner nothing at the end of harvest because she had paid her bills along the way. And I just realized and recognized that my grandmother, who had a third grade education, probably the equivalent of pre-K in today's market, couldn't read, couldn't write, but could count money, and she was an entrepreneur. And so I think that there are so many challenges, and a lot of times we repeat the behavior that we witness. And so when many of our kids sit at the dinner table with us and other families of color and African American families, if we sit down, we're not talking about what happened in Dad's business today. We're not talking about how successful the salespeople were who brought additional business to our business. We're talking about other issues. We're talking about how to protect yourself when you're out in public and how to behave and how to act. And so if you don't hear about the potential of business ownership and of entrepreneurship, you don't think about it. And so it is very important that our kids have access to education so they understand the opportunities in entrepreneurship. I think based on the work that we do at TEDC, just looking at the disparities in the applications that we get from African Americans who are trying to start or grow a business, they're behind before they start, because just as you would, Governor, when you're looking at considering a mortgage to someone or a bank loan, there are things you're going to look at, and the first is that personal financial statement. So if I don't have cash on my financial statement in order to inject capital into my business, you're likely not going to give money. If I don't have net worth because I don't have a home that has grown in terms of its value so that I have equity, I don't have collateral necessarily for my loan. And so we start behind the 8 ball, and I think it's very common. If you don't have a business as a legacy business in your family, and I think research does show this, you don't think about entrepreneurship, and if you start a business, it is very difficult to succeed. And so across the board, I see lower credit scores from African Americans. I see lower net worth. I see less experience, less leadership. And all of those are things that can be overcome through the right types of program, as I said before, education, the training, the apprenticeships, the access to capital, and that is flexible and generous capital, and then procurement opportunities for minority businesses. And all of those now are lagging, and we need to be intentional about how we create those programs to create sustainability for those people who want to start and grow a business.
Thank you. Excellent. Does anybody have another follow-up comment?
Yes, and on top of that, another issue too that Black-owned businesses face and being able to sustain is that when people see that they are Black-owned businesses, people assume that they're only for Black-owned consumers. And we need to change that mindset, that just because we are Black-owned businesses does not mean that we only cater to our own demographic. We all have businesses out here that can cater to any and everybody. And so we need to start tearing down that narrative and saying, you know what, this Black-owned business is not just for Black Americans, it's for any American or international, it doesn't matter. Our businesses are open to everyone.
Well, Governor, I also want to talk to you about another problem in underserved communities, particularly in North Tulsa, where at one time people lived 14 years less than other people in the city, and now at 11, where we have Oklahoma State University and Langston University, both land-grant universities that are agricultural schools, but both have entrepreneurship programs. OSU has an entrepreneurship bachelor's degree, and Langston has an entrepreneurship master's degree. And it's been said that unhealthy children can't learn and unhealthy adults can't earn. And that food insecurity issue, had Senate Bill 749 passed, where we created a revolving fund to eradicate food deserts. And the opportunity for those two universities to work together to not only teach young people about food insecurity, but to have the opportunity to develop a way for Black people to own their own grocery store ultimately. And so I would challenge you to help me to bring those universities together to solve that problem, because North Tulsa used to have 31 grocery stores and now 0 Black-owned stores. And that's something that would make a difference. It would create jobs, it would create opportunities, and it would, I think, go a long way to eradicating food deserts and terrible health outcomes.
Absolutely. We'll do it. We'll work on that. Maurianna, we've been talking about Black enterprise and entrepreneurships in various markets and industries, but businesses also grow in the context of the communities where they operate. You work specifically in communities where there's been a significant de-investment. What are the needs and challenges we need to be aware of to better support underserved communities?
That's a really good question. So, along the lines of context, I think it's important to discuss how we got here, where we are, and how we can move forward. And so when we talk about the representation of Black businesses within certain industries and the underrepresentation of us, of Black business owners in certain industries, and the need for financial capital, social capital, et cetera, the things that we previously discussed, we have to talk about wealth gap and why there is a wealth gap and how you do need, wealth and the legacy of wealth, right, to enter into certain industries. And so when we think about Oklahoma, and with this conversation, it's been important nationally, and the previous conversation that you've had, what we've recognized is there's no city or state that doesn't have scars of injustice and inequality. And so when we think about the historical context of what led us here is the exclusion of Black people and their families to programs that would have helped them accelerate wealth or access wealth, or even this disruption of wealth through urban renewal and things like that. And so when that happens, it not only impacts the folks that were there, it impacts the generations to come. And we're seeing that. We see that in North Tulsa, we see that in Northeast Oklahoma City. And so because of that, there are contemporary challenges. So high rates of poverty, unemployment, businesses that are closing or unable to succeed or thrive in that community and serve that community. And we know that businesses are the backbone of our local economy. And so, one thing, there are many challenges, but there are also many opportunities for us to create, pathways for Black businesses, those that are aspiring to be entrepreneurs, to enter into industries. Let's talk about technology, for example, where they can accelerate wealth, right? So we're not only in the service industries, but we're in a wide variety of industries that put us in a position to where we can build wealth and build it fast and pass that on to the generation to come, and thereby improve and strengthen the social and economic fabric in which our family lives or our business is located. For Northeast Oklahoma City in particular, we have had a lot of, when businesses leave, people leave, because they don't have the amenities and services that so many of us take for granted. And that's not only with businesses, but healthcare and education and et cetera and so forth. And so people are left, the people that are left there are left with fewer opportunities, fewer job opportunities, and few opportunities to be well. And so it has this compounding effect that I know for the city of Oklahoma City, we're looking at and we're trying to figure out how we can address that through some very intentional program. We know that, how we got here, how all of us got here looked differently, and how we're going to get out of this looks differently. And so we have to create programs and initiatives that are specifically geared towards those underserved communities that address small business, entrepreneurship, affordable housing, workforce, because all of those things are intersected and they're all connected.
Excellent, thank you.
So, Governor, can I piggyback
Sure.
on that? So, Senator Matthews talked about food deserts and programs in that regard. Maurianna talked a bit about what I heard is the lack of legacy businesses that are passed on. And so you mentioned that Senator Matthews is the founder of the Race Massacre Commission that is working to commemorate the centennial next year. And TEDC is also working on annihilating food deserts in North Tulsa. Namely, next week we're going to break ground or announce the groundbreaking on a new store in North Tulsa. And as I thought back through how to get that done and how to partner with community to get it done, I thought, why is it so hard? And then I thought back to 1921 and the records that I've read that reflect that there were 20, 30 corner stores that were destroyed not longer than 99 years ago today. And we don't know how many of those stores had the potential of becoming a Walmart because they were never passed down from generation to generation. So I think the potential that we had and that we have is untapped, and we have to work hard to eliminate the disparity and create the opportunities, those pathways that Maurianna mentioned, so that we empower people of color, African Americans who want to be in business to go into business.
Is it entrepreneurship? Is it education? What is it that we can get that next generation to step up in the entrepreneurship?
I think it's all of the above. Now, I told you that I grew up in rural Mississippi. What I didn't say is that I went to a county high school, which was probably the second poorest county in the nation at that time. But I was able to take accounting 1 and 2 and business law. And just having access and exposure to those classes gave me an idea of what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Yeah.
And I stayed on the path of business. Now, I did not become an entrepreneur. I do run a corporation right now, but I had the exposure to it, and we have to give more of our children that kind of exposure to opt in versus being left out.
Sure.
Well, Governor, when I was in the House of Representatives, R.C. Pruitt was in the House with me, and he is a big-time grocer, on 3 major grocery stores. And when I was talking to him about the problem, as she said, if we had partnerships and worked with you and the chamber and other leaders to partner people interested to teach how that happens. We don't have black grocers today to mentor other people that want to go into that business. That's why I was saying the entrepreneurial schools, the leaders in that area, and major corporations being willing to at least trust and work with individuals to have maybe a satellite grocery store that they mentor persons in that community to learn to own.
Excellent.
And also in terms of the wealth gap, we can't talk about this conversation of entrepreneurship without the wealth gap. The McKinsey company, they did a report, and it said that because of the wealth gap disparity, that we are, as a country, our country is losing $1 to $1.5 trillion, which is about 4 to 6% GDP, because of this deafening wealth gap. And one of the ways that we can, to minimize that wealth gap, is through entrepreneurship into communities. Our tagline for Black Women Business Owners of America is equity in entrepreneurship. So when you take the time as a state and as cities to partner with, as Senator Matthews has said, and as Rose has said, to partner with potential Black entrepreneurs to grow their businesses, then you're talking about, it's a ripple effect. You're talking about growing their income, increasing their family wealth, which then increases our state revenues, which then increases our national revenues, and we are having a better economy. And so as we're looking at that, at these issues and these disparities, this disparity does not just affect Black Americans, it's affecting our whole entire country.
Yeah. Well, Wes, I want to turn to you for a second. You come at this conversation spending 35 years in corporate America. You know, specifically with the tech industry, I think Hewlett-Packard is where you were at for 35 years. So what challenges have you seen, and what advice would you share to the next generation of African Americans about working in this important, thriving tech industry?
Governor, I was fortunate to work in the industry, and the tech industry was talent-based, and it still is for the most part. It's not as divided as a lot of other businesses. So if you are talented and you can code, they really don't care what you look like. So I think the opportunity there is, with the proper education, it goes back to education, it goes back to food, it goes back to the whole cycle, but as you go into a field, and Rick Bennett, who's one of my board members at Junior Achievement, talks about the social capital and says that you can't expect a child to succeed when they think the horizon is the top of the ditch that they're standing in. So, very powerful statement, but that goes to the social capital, and how do we educate, and how do we put opportunities, satellite coding opportunities in the city. STEM is unfortunately very, very, very important, and it will become more important. But I was working with the STEM lab the other day, and they have a Hidden Figures program where they have women mentoring school-age kids, girls, whose truancy exceeded the normal rate. And if you think about truancy, if I'm not doing good, I'm not going to school. And by mentoring these girls in math, not only did their math scores come up, but their truancy went down. So it's about investing in social and financial capital. And to Charity's point, a Black business is not a Black business. You going to take the action step to go to a Black business and say, hey, I'm here to do business, sets a major tone. But I think education is the key in technology field, but it's a huge opportunity.
Well, you said something there. I mean, I'd say it a different way. I mean, without hope and without a vision, people perish. And so we've got to provide hope to that next generation. And that's examples in business and those entrepreneurs, and letting those young people all across Oklahoma see what's possible, because I believe you can do anything you set your mind to, and we've got to get that hope into that next generation of all Oklahomans. This question is for you, Senator. You know, what isn't happening or available right now that could make a positive impact? What initiatives or programs would you like to see developed in the state of Oklahoma?
Well, thank you for that question, Governor. The 100 Black Men Mentoring Program that I'm part of, their national mission is what they see is what they'll be. So we try to be good examples. But we've been having conversations with the Chamber and executive teams about expanding my Entrepreneur Shadow Program to major corporations that will expose these young African American children that are responsible. Some of them have even gone to OSU and OU and other schools across the state, as well as Langston and our public universities, starting with TCC and TULSA Chiefs. We want, or I believe that the opportunity, if we had the willingness to have our corporations mentor and have internships with these young people to expose them at that level. Most people, as was just said a moment ago, their world is what they've been exposed to. We need exposure through paid internships and those types of opportunities.
Well, there's an initiative this year called JAG that I'm starting in some underserved communities, high schools, that actually encourages and they take young people and introduce them to corporations on mentorships, and let them go work in the workplace to get that exposure. So I think you've hit on something there. So I've encouraged our higher ed, our common ed, our career techs to work with industry to provide that exposure. I think that's really, really critical. So we need to get to the chamber and get that across the finish line with our schools.
What I want to make sure of, Governor, just like the junior achievement and these models, we do have some good programs. We just don't see black kids in them.
So, Governor, may I?
Yes,
may I add
please.
something? I've talked about or mentioned procurement as an opportunity for us to give African American business owners access to really business opportunities. And I think that's important in government as well as in large corporations. November 6th of 2012, State Question 759 passed. And I don't know if you were paying attention back then as you were growing your business, but basically State Question 759 made affirmative action illegal in Oklahoma. And while maybe some of the intention was to eliminate preferences in granting scholarships in higher ed, what happened is it put a nail in the coffin of probably thousands of black businesses in Oklahoma who relied on government for business. And so if you look at the GDP of Oklahoma, I don't know what it is now, but in 2016, I think my notes say about 186 billion maybe. 30 billion of that was in government spending. And so that's roughly 16%. Well, that's 16% of revenue produced in this state that African Americans did not get a piece of because historically they had had access through these set-asides for government spending at the city level, the county level, as well as the state level. Well, that opportunity is over. And so I think one thing, which is a huge challenge, is to try to modify the state constitution to allow for those types of set-asides, which I'm telling you, a lot of African American businesses relied on, and a lot of them lost everything when cities and states and counties no longer could offer those procurement programs to them.
Governor, you know we have the 8-year program on transportation across the state, and I'm on Transportation Committee, which is a very important part of making us a top 10 state. When I was the chair of the Oklahoma Legislative Black Caucus just a couple of years ago, black people had only 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1% of those contracts on road and bridge contracts. And so that's an area that I've been trying to work on, that we have to be purposeful in exposing people and not just saying that they get the information, but having the type of assistance with people that understand the community, that need those opportunities to get them.
And to even expound on having the procurement processes and the importance of it, that it's needed. During one of my pre-solicitation calls with the city of Tulsa for a project, there were contractors asking the city, you know, who are the black-owned businesses? And they had, you know, it was hurting to listen to our city officials say, well, because of this, we are not allowed to determine that. So on another side, even the contractors that are interested in even getting access to us, they can't even get help from our city and our state to even say, these are the businesses that are black-owned that you can do business with. And so it's definitely a disenfranchising on multiple levels.
And I would like to add on to what you're saying, looking at the municipal level or city government, Recently with COVID-19, it forced our governments to be more agile and more responsive, and in a way that was quick and almost overnight, so we could support businesses, not only job creation, but job retention. And we've seen that at the federal level and state level and local level. And something that took place in the city of Oklahoma City through 2 programs is there were set aside specifically for low-income communities, which in Oklahoma City are disproportionately overrepresented by African Americans and Hispanic populations. And so by doing that, what we've seen is more diversity, because we said we are going to commit 25% of our funds towards these communities, these census tracts. And being on the committee where we were able to disperse those funds, hearing some of the stories and the experiences and people saying, I didn't think that this program was designed for me. I hear that often, is I didn't feel that this program was actually designed for me, and the fact that you all made that commitment spoke volumes. And then there was another program that took it even a step further and said, we are not only going to focus on low-income communities, but we are going to prioritize minority-owned firms and women-owned firms. And to be able to say that even out loud, talking about courageous conversations, courageous commitments, that then opens the door for folks to say that this program is designed for me, and to the point of people talking about capacity, right, and experience and knowledge. Allowing and partnering, those private-public partnerships are so important, because then you can partner with a nonprofit that says, if you don't know how to go through the process, we will support you, because we don't want to exclude you. And so we had our community action agency that was able to provide those businesses technical support, and we asked for the bare minimum. We didn't give them a 12-page application. We asked for the bare minimum and said that we will help you. We will help strengthen your capacity, because it's so important to our local economy that you're successful, that you produce jobs, that you pay livable wages. And as a government, we are going to help do that. So moving from courageous conversations to commitments and actions is really, really important.
Excellent. I'd like to put this question to all the panelists, and Charity, ask you to kind of start us. For those who are watching on TV, and for those in positions of influence, hearing the challenges and the opportunities we've discussed, what actions can we take up to make change?
I'm impressed that you have your Minority Business Council. I don't know that that's happened before you became governor. I appreciate that. Having this conversation is a bold move. And what I would say to those that are listening, that have corporations and resources and are the influencers in our state and our cities, choose a millennial black person. Ask people in your company or people in your community, who are the young African-American people that need the opportunity to be on a key board that makes these decisions, to be in a room and to be on these boards that make a difference, so that they are exposed to. Because what happens is that people choose and work with people they're familiar with. And I'm familiar with many of these people by the boards and commissions I've been on. And so when you make appointments on boards and commissions, think of diversity. Think of who's not in the room, and how can we pick these up-and-coming people that are preparing themselves and give them that opportunity, and be intentional about it. Because many times these things don't happen on purpose. It's just the fact that we don't consciously think of it and the unintended consequences.
I think you hit on something there. I mean, asking these companies, I think a practical thing they can do is inviting some of these, partner with high schools, bringing some of these kids in for after-school programs all across Oklahoma. I think you do bring another perspective. And in my teams that I've led over the years, I tell them, if we're all thinking the same, nobody's thinking. So I love dialogue and debate, and tell me where I'm wrong and where I can learn. And so I think with building groups of different thought process, that's where you squeeze out the best ideas. And so I would challenge the companies that are listening to really open up to some high school and some college kids, and bring those kids in for summer jobs and maybe even after school. Charity, did you have something?
Yes, what I would like to see is diversity procurement programming here in the state, so that we can get those processes and those contracts. I would also like to see an expansion of our current state tax credits. A lot of our tax credits are not built for small businesses under 50 employees. So when you're talking about 0 to 10 employees, where are the tax credits for small business owners and entrepreneurs? And even though this is a conversation on Black businesses, but being able to expand those tax credits on a statewide level to all small businesses will definitely be better for our businesses. And then also a focus on service-based industries. A lot of Black-owned businesses, they are service-based businesses. So they don't have access to a lot of opportunities because they are service-based. A lot of times companies are looking for products in different types of tangible items, but we need more focus on our service-based businesses.
I think Senator said it perfectly. We have to make some purposeful decisions, and we think about the impact, the social capital, as well as the financial capital, which are the things that are missing, have to make some really tough choices. As Charity talked about, we're working on 759. How do we get people exposure to monies that are being spent for gain, for purposeful gain, not for gifts? And how do we train our kids to grow into those opportunities? So it's a couple of purposeful things, and talk the talk. A Black business is not just a Black business. Seeing you walk in one and buying a hat would be a great thing. But that's the leadership that you're showing by having this conversation and the action steps that I think we need to come out of this with. Also, economic opportunity zones for underserved areas where investors are incented to make investments in businesses in areas where they need businesses. And that's huge. And that covers the mentorship part. I invested my money as a venture capitalist in Charity's business in an underserved area. I'm going to be right there with her, making her succeed because I get a financial gain out of it.
Excellent. Well, we are about out of time. I'm going to finish with this last question for everyone. First off, thank you all for sharing your time with us today, your perspective and your wisdom. What other questions do we need to start asking as we keep working toward making change and progress?
I would say, what we're doing in Oklahoma City is we really don't have at this point a baseline for how we're doing so far as data of how we're doing to lead to some of these actions, right? And so we need to be able to evaluate and create metrics as a city or state that says that this is a part. When we talk about progress indicators, this metric measures our success, and we need to see where we are so we can figure out where to go. And so being able to institutionalize that we need to see where our dollars are on an annual basis, how they're being deployed into who. We need to see, so far as the educational opportunities that you said, who's participating in that, how effective is the program, how successful are they creating those pipelines. So the research and data piece is so important. So we can figure out what we're doing really well and then where there's opportunities for growth as well.
Excellent.
I think, again, going back to the purposeful word, that make some decisions that show progress and that show hope, and that people say this is not the same conversation we had and with the same results. I think those metrics, the key production indicators or KPIs, to talk about the progress we're making is a great idea. Then you have something to show. Here's where we are, here's where we need to go. I just think investment, time and money in the areas that need it. And I think our ecosystem is broken, and I had this conversation with Secretary Sean. I said, our ecosystem is broken. The problems in the underserved areas are very similar to the problems in the rural areas. We don't have food in the underserved areas, and we have farms that are going out of business in the rural areas. That distribution channel is broken. So we need to act like we have an ecosystem and come up with some positive outcomes.
Governor, when I worked on the fire department, we have had and still have, we just hired a new fire chief this past week. I was fortunate enough to be on that interview panel, and when our administration looked at the fact that at that time, under that administration, we had no women on the fire department, we had no Hispanics, we had nobody that was bilingual, and the African Americans that were forced to be on the fire department with a consent decree were all retiring. Our administration gave me the opportunity to be over that because I not only understood what the administration wanted, but I also understood the community. And so you as a governor, those mayors, those CEOs that can reach out into the community with somebody that has the capacity and relationships to understand the problem and the people and make them responsible and empower them to come up with those measurable results, I think it would make a ton of difference, and it would be better for you, any leaders, and it would be better for our cities and our states.
Excellent.
So, Governor, I think being intentional, being aware, and measuring outcome are all really important. And when I talked about minority procurement and African American procurement and set-asides, my intention was not to say to set it here and allow us access, because competition is important, and of course, budgets are limited, and we understand that the lowest bidder gets the job, the lowest qualified bidder. But it is important that this minority procurement conversation be held seriously and changes made, not so that African American businesses are given jobs, but so they're paid attention to when they're seeking jobs and contracts, et cetera. And so I just encourage you and every corporation out there to take this on and take it seriously and set a goal, set an objective, and pursue it. And then continue these conversations. My daughter says that I can be asked to the dance, Mom, but if I don't get asked to dance, I'm left out. And so I think it's very important for you to continue the conversation with African American business owners in order to affect real change. And I really thank you for starting the dialogue today and challenge you to continue it, not just with those business owners, but with those larger corporations who really have the power to make impact.
And I would definitely like to challenge business leaders and elected officials to further engage the Minority Business Council and to partner with us in creating an equitable Oklahoma. That's the reason why you and Secretary Copeland founded this council, so that we could work to achieve a better Oklahoma for minority businesses across this state. So being more intentional and utilizing a network of amazing leaders from across this state, from different perspectives and different backgrounds, is needed. When people talk about D&I in corporate America, they always say that the companies that have diversity in their leadership, inclusion and equity in their leadership, financially, they're far better off than any other corporation. And it's no different for states and our revenues. When everybody in the state has the same opportunities, the same access to compete, we're going to have a far better state.
A top 10 state.
A top 10 state, that's right, that's right. Well, thank you guys so much for what you're all doing, for your leadership in Oklahoma. I really, really appreciate you for joining me today to start this conversation. And I also want to thank Oklahomans for joining me and listening and learning from this fantastic panel of leaders. We are going to keep learning and working together to move Oklahoma forward. We are stronger when we all work together and create a great opportunity for every single Oklahoman. So that's my dream, that's my purpose as being governor. And like you said, Wes, let's make Oklahoma a top 10 state.